folks on this committee.
Yeah.
As well, so I don't think it was a detriment. I am Josh Schulman, Committee Chair, the citizen representative from the city of St. Petersburg. I'd like to go around the room and have us introduce ourselves, starting on my
Vince
left.
Cox, citizen representative for Pinellas County.
Deborah Fig Sanders, St. Petersburg City Council.
Jim Oliver, Seminole City Council.
Dave Albritton, Clearwater City Council.
And I'd like to thank our committee members for showing up and being here to work diligently. Is there any public comment? And I recognize that Commissioner Gao has entered the room, I believe. Are you just hanging out here? Are you going to join?
Hanging out with cool people if I can.
Okay, that's the other room, but okay. So Commissioner Gao from Dunedin's also here to observe the committee. Seeing that there's no one to speak, we'll move on with our first action item, which is the approval of the October 18th minutes.
We'll move approval of the minutes with the correction of the Scrivener's error. It says that the meeting that I made a motion to approve the minutes of the Finance Committee, that is incorrect.
Oh, right.
I made a motion to approve the Planning Committee minutes, so with that correction, I'll move approval.
Good catch.
Is that correction on second?
I don't know, I thought you were in the Finance Committee.
No, I hung out.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you for that. The motion passed unanimously. We'll move on to, well, that was our only action item, but we'll move on to our informational items. Item 4A, the Directions for Living Homeless Assistance Pilot Update. Here with us today is April Lott, President and CEO of Directions for Living, who will update the committee after 6 months of our pilot effort to create a positive engagement of the unhoused at our Grand Central Station. April, the floor is yours.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you. So we've actually been in partnership for a little longer than the 6 months. Just to kind of level set and to remind the group, we started, Brad and his team came to me to say, is there something else we might be able to do at Grand Central? We narrowed it down to Grand Central Station. The PSTA had worked in partnership with the City of St. Petersburg Police Department, had done a variety of things that didn't seem to be really working in terms of diverting people who were living unhoused or living homeless and kind of congregating at the Grand Central Station. Some of the things that the first couple months were a little, I'm going to use the word rough, a little bit of a rough start, simply because we didn't have everybody on the same page. There were people who were trying to do one thing when we were trying to do something else. For example, there's a what is I think referred to as the trespass wall, and so there are individuals who are trespassed from Grand Central Station, and they have been identified as people who can't be there. Some of those people were people that we probably should have been engaging with. There was an outside security team that was working to kind of move people along, and as we moved people along, we couldn't get our hands around those people. Some of those kinds of things, but we met frequently with Brad and his team and got some of those things worked out pretty quickly. So I would say our 6 months worth of data, there we go. Our 6 months worth of data is probably pretty good. So what we can see right now, if you go to Grand Central Station and someone were to say to you, so how many people do you think come to Grand Central Station who are living housing unstable or living homeless? It probably feels like 1,000, maybe even feels like 2,000. It feels like a lot of people. What we've been able to determine is that there are about 30 individuals who are there most every day and night. It's about 30. We have, and you'll see in a later slide, we've actually served about 300 people, but most of them are people who are coming and going. We don't see them frequently, but the 30 who are living there or living kind of on the perimeter of the Grand Central Station, there's about 30 of them. And these are the statistics of those individuals. 17 of them are men, 2 of them are transgender male, 13 are women. One of them is a mother with a very young baby. We have not seen a lot of families there for extended periods of time. There are certainly families in the perimeter. There's a vacant unoccupied restaurant right there to the left, and oftentimes there are vehicles there with families living in the vehicle. We tend to be able to connect with them and move them on pretty quickly. They are not the ones who are living there like indefinitely. They range in age, the 30 range in age from 26 to 64, with the average age being about 43. Again, we do see younger people, but they're not people who are staying put. They're kind of transient, and they're moving along rather quickly. The race of these 30 individuals, 11 of them are African American, 17 are white, and 2 are Hispanic. The number of years homeless for this group, remember, we've been trying to just really figure out the difference in this pilot. I want to just say, the difference in this pilot, which I so appreciate and am grateful to the PSTA, is that we are not focused on simply moving people to shelter. Again, something that's been tried 1,000 times, right? This hard-to-serve group is not interested in shelter. And simply moving them to shelter will not do anything. And we've seen that with PSTA and other projects, where we move them to shelter, we provide the transportation to shelter, and the next day they're right back where they were before, right? And so it's an exercise kind of in futility. So really this pilot has been about what can we learn about this very hard to serve, what I'm gonna call chronic, homeless population. What can we learn about them? Are there any trends that would be helpful to figure out how we are investing resources and those kinds of things? So the average, the number of years living on the street is 5 months to 18 years. The average is about 5.5 months living homeless. But when you take out some of the one-offs and some of the outliers, it really is closer to the 15, 16, 17 years. These people have, the majority of them kind of became homeless, and once became homeless have not been housed since. 17 of these individuals have family in the U.S., 13 of them have family locally. And that was one of the questions that we wanted to know is, do you have family locally that we could maybe repair relationships and get you reconnected? It turns out that that's probably not likely for the majority of them, and we can talk about that. 12 of them receive public assistance, 10 of them are receiving Social Security disability insurance. What's interesting about that is that their Social Security disability insurance is simply not enough to cover their housing. So it's enough for them to get by, so to speak, but it's in the $600-700 range. They're not. It's just simply not enough to rent an apartment and live independently. 26 of the 30 have been in and out of local emergency shelters. So they've gone in and out of Pinellas Hope, in and out of Safe Harbor, in and out. They've just been in and out and have not been successful. What was interesting is that 7 of them, of the 30, reported a substance use disorder by self-report. But when we get into their stories, what we can actually see is that 15 of them actually have a substance use that's keeping them homeless, and 15 of them are reporting a mental illness. What I can tell you is that 30 of the 30 have a chronic mental health disorder. All 30 of them have a mental illness. The vast majority of it being what they are calling post-traumatic stress disorder and depression and those kinds of things. We are not seeing, interestingly enough, we are not seeing a lot of things like schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder. Some of the more troubling mental health conditions or mental illnesses, we have not really experienced that, which is interesting because it's often a myth, right, that we hear about people who are living homeless, talking to themselves, talking to things that aren't there, clear sign of schizophrenia. We're not encountering much of that in these 30 individuals. One individual recently died due to an overdose. We have not been tracking, but we intend to start tracking. I want to talk a little bit about this data, but we have not been tracking the use of EMS, calls to EMS and calls to 911. We do understand that it has been a problem in the past where 911 and EMS kind of responding to the Grand Central Station has been a problem in the past. We have not been tracking that, but now that we pretty much know these 30 individuals, we are going to start tracking to see what else we can learn about this group. In total, we've encountered 300 separate, unique individuals. Some we see for 3, 4, 5, 6 days. Some we see for a couple of weeks and then they go away and we don't see them again. Some we've seen one time and then we don't see them again. But this core group of 30 is basically there every single day. We've assisted with one individual getting insurance. I do want to say about the insurance. So if you've been to Grand Central Station anytime in the last 6 months, you will have noticed probably that there are outside of Grand Central Station's grounds, there are tents of people selling things, and one such tents are insurance. And it is a true problem. We've elevated this issue to a variety of stakeholders in our community to try to get our hands around this, which is that they are tricking these individuals out of their current insurance and tricking them into a different insurance that is worthless. And so they're often doing that with what I'm going to call a bribe of some kind. So a $25, gift card, a free cell phone, this kind of thing. So they trick them, and they often then give up their insurance. They're very good insurance. We work really hard, by the way, to get people on the Pinellas County Health Plan, which is provided through the Board of County Commission, and it is a wonderful health plan. And so they trick them off these health plans. And so we work really hard to try to get people back on. That is not represented here. We're going to do more work with tracking that. We've reconnected one individual with family. 4 people we've assisted with getting into substance use treatment. By the way, we work in partnership with Operation PAR. And so when somebody is ready to go into treatment, frequently they have to go through detox first. It can be very, very costly, but through these partnerships and relationships, it is of no cost to the individual, and so 4 of them have been admitted into treatment. 5 went into emergency shelter. We only count the emergency shelter here as if they've remained at emergency shelter. So in the early days, right, the staff were taking people to and from. It's like, stop doing that. that is not effective, and it's inefficient. So 5 people have actually gone into emergency shelter and stayed. Many of you may know that once you get into emergency shelter, you get what is called a VI SPDAT, which is a vulnerability assessment. Once we know your vulnerability number, you then get prioritized for things like permanent supported housing, rapid rehousing, vouchers, those kinds of things. So we really do need you to have a VI SPDAT score in order to access all the other services that are available in the county. And so going into emergency shelter helps that process. And we have one individual, one family, who actually was coming to using PSTA to get to and from work, that sought out the staff. She is not one of the 30. She sought out the staff there to say that she was having a very, very hard time. She was facing eviction. We were able to work with her landlord, and we actually prevented that homelessness of her and her. She has an adolescent disabled child, and we were able to keep her housed. In terms of what is needed the most for this group, certainly permanent supported housing. And so I think a lot of people think they know what permanent supported housing is when they don't really. The key to permanent housing is the supports, right? It is the support services. It is also, unfortunately, what is the most expensive part of housing for people who need support. The support is ongoing. Many of these individuals, in fact, all 30 of them, live with a mental illness that will probably need treatment for the rest of their lives. Medication of some kind. I myself am a diabetic, right? I have to take medication every single day. Many of their illnesses are the same. They will need medications every single day. And if, like me, if I go off my medication, I will have serious consequences. that will be very, very costly. They too, if they went off their medication or stopped getting the supports that they needed, they too would fall off, the cliff, so to speak, and be very, very expensive. So that really is the piece that I think not just as an organization with the PSTA, but really as a community, that we are struggling with, is the supports needed and the housing. As you know, affordable housing is just simply not available most places, and if your Social Security Disability Insurance is a $600 check or a $500 check, you cannot live independently with those dollars. One of the things that we were hoping to see maybe is that many of these individuals might have been older and could have benefited from an ALF or an assisted living facility. We had a handful of those in the beginning. We were able to get connected to an ALF, and they live now in an ALF, but it really wasn't the population. As I said, the average age is about 45, 46, 47 for the end of these 30 that we are focused on. So I want to answer whatever questions you have. We have some plans in terms of what we're doing next, right? This first 6 months really has been about trying to get to know these individuals. What I will say to you is I don't think we know them yet. For example, as I said in the slide, many of them are saying, right, that they don't have a substance use problem, right? But they do. So they're not willing yet to share that because I think that they're fearful of sharing that. We do not know their trauma histories. And that will be kind of where we're moving to next, is we really do want to know what their childhood, so to speak, was like. What do we know about these individuals and their trauma histories? I think some of the assumptions that people make about these individuals, we've proven in some cases are true, in some cases are not true. So certainly substance misuse is a common perception of people who are driving by, seeing people who are living homeless. But I think a lot of people overlook the mental illness and the mental health conditions, and we certainly have seen that. So that's that. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Questions?
Thank you, April, for
Yes.
this presentation. And noted here I noted the folks with the SSDI, which is roughly $600-700 a month. And do not some of the folks that get that at the beginning of the month or whenever they get their money, use that to go to perhaps like a hotel or something like
Yes.
that, and then it runs out after
Yes.
2 weeks or something.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
pretty frequent.
Very, very common for that to occur. And sometimes they even pool money, right, and stay together. But yes, they will spend their money rather quickly on things like hotel. Again, a misperception I think a lot of times is that, people are panhandling and or spending their money on drugs or alcohol. That's not frequently the way they're spending all of their money. It really is on hotel. By the way, I would, some of these hotels are making hand over fist. I mean, I never hear anybody talking about the business side of the homeless. But at some point, somebody should start talking about the business side of the homeless. There are a lot of entities in Pinellas County who are being made very rich by the homeless. And we never talk about that. And I think at some point we should start talking about it. But in any case, yes, that is true.
Well, you talked about all the tents that you see on the sidewalk.
Making hand over fist. So those people who are, every time they convert somebody, right, they talk them into, right, they get a commission for that, right? There's people making a lot of money off the homeless. And we are doing everything we can in partnership with PSTA, in partnership with St. Pete PD, to shut these tents down. We get them shut down because, for example, we get there, right? We're there. First couple weeks we're there. St. Pete PD, right, who I love, and Chief Holloway used to be on my board of directors. He's a very good friend of mine. In any case, we get there, right, and they're moving us along, right? The police are saying, we can't be there. You can't be here. If we allow you to be here, we have to allow everybody else to be here, kind of stuff. And they're, right, so we get moved along. We're not allowed to be there. And yet these tents, right? So I'm like, how come these tents get to be here, right? We can't be here, but how come the tents get to be here? There was some assumption that they actually had because it was a business, because they had a business tent, right? That they had some kind of business-like license. Do you remember this, Brad? I'm like, I want you right now, officer, whoever you are, I want you to go straight to that tent and ask to see their business license. And you remember, we did that, right? So we go there, what is your business license? Show it, right? They don't have it. They immediately start packing up, right? And putting their stuff away and moving along. But no sooner do we get them moving along, a week later, 2 weeks later, or whatever, they're all right back there. And there's dozens of them. There's literally dozens of them. And they're unkind people, truly.
Commissioner Fix Sanders?
Thank you. And April, thank you for the presentation and for bringing that up. The business side of it has been spoken about because I was on CDBG for the city of St. Petersburg, and a lot of those hotels would actually try to get funding from those South St. Pete CRA dollars, and there are a couple I can name, but I won't. And I think I was the only no vote on those because of the fact that what they charged those families for those roach-infested family of 5, 6, 1 bed, paying at least $280 to $300 a week back then, paying at least $250 to $300 a week for that just ridiculous accommodations. And so, yes, you're right, that does need to be addressed. We, as a city, did have a conversation about the panhandling and the quote-unquote vendors on the sidewalk. And a lot of the ones that you see now cannot be on right-of-way, so they're getting permission. If they're on the other side of the sidewalk, they're getting permission from the owners to be on that sidewalk and on that property. And what Deborah, let me speak for Deborah.
Yeah.
And what Deborah was led to understand is that the free services, the insurance, this is the first I'm hearing about the insurance, but like the free cell phones and the free, those were the ones that, I didn't have an issue with. So now I'm gonna go check on the insurance, because I didn't know that they were actually selling insurance out there, but I did know about the cell phones. I did know about them providing free access to the cell phone. So you're absolutely correct that we probably do need to start paying more attention to the financial gains from our homeless, because you are absolutely right. I knew it many, many years ago, and it still hasn't gotten any better, unfortunately. And even with us doing services to the homeless hotels and those vouchers, it was very disappointing and sad to see those families being taken advantage of. As a city, I don't know what we can do about it. There's nothing we can do about private enterprise, but.
Exactly, I know.
You can license it.
But yeah, still, I don't know what we could do, and I think education and attention to that issue would definitely be our first step of advocacy for that. But yeah, we definitely, I know I definitely prevented taxpayers' dollars going to a couple of those hotels, and I don't think we've seen them since, especially since I've been on council. They have not received any money on that. So, okay, so now you have my wheels turning as to what we need to actually do to continue to have that conversation, and thank you for bringing that up.
So I want to say thank you again. I also want to say thank you to Brad for bringing this forward for us to consider 6, 7, 8 months ago. Before citizens had brought the unhoused or homeless to our attention, we were already working on trying to understand the population. So this is, again, PSTA being proactive. And it's always heartbreaking for me to hear, things like this, but it's also encouraging that we have people in our community that are working on these issues and trying to make it better one person, one family at a time. Along the lines of the unlicensed or the licensed businesses on private property, and I don't know if the folks that you're tracking would use, but do we have any materials on predatory sales practices and things like that
We don't really have materials on it, but we have language, and we are doing everything we can to educate people about, and I love your word, predatory business practices, because that's exactly what it is. I will tell you that we have met with the businesses because Councilwoman Fig Sanders is correct. They appear to have gotten permission from businesses to be on where they, in some cases, where they are. And so we went with the City of St. Petersburg law enforcement, actually, and we went to every one of the businesses to kind of educate them on the predatory practices, to say, you know, we really encourage you not to give permission for these tents to be here and those kinds of things. You know, it felt like it made a difference for, you know, a couple of weeks, and then it kind of slipped again. I'm sure they have turnover in staff and, you know, various things like that. But we do educate. We interestingly enough, it really has been our community policymakers that didn't have an idea about some of this, and we've brought it to the Board of County Commission, to the staff of the county commission to say, we really need your help in, you know, in stopping some of these things, because they're getting free phones in exchange for, and as you know, for people who don't have a cell phone or who need a $25 gift card or whatever, it's a very attractive, to do. And by the way, they get credit. So if they give them a $25 gift card and they change their insurance, 3 days later, 4 weeks later, they can do that again, right? They're gonna switch them again. So we spend a lot of time, it's not in this data, but we spend a lot of time converting them back. As soon as we know about it, we're converting them back. Because the Pinellas County Health Plan insurance, if you're familiar with that, I like to call it the Cadillac of insurances. I mean, it's a pretty good insurance for people who are uninsured and uninsurable through Medicaid and those kinds of things. As you know, we're not a Medicaid expansion state and all that kind of stuff. So there's a huge population that is uninsured because they don't qualify for the type of Medicaid that we have in the state of Florida. And so anyway, the Pinellas County Health Plan is a very good health plan. So every time they kick them off that, it's very, very harmful to all of us, because then they become indigent, so to speak. There's no insurance. It's very, very costly, and, you know, whatever. But we are working with those businesses to try to get them to work in partnership with us.
And I also, along the education front, I mean, teaching consumers, and this is true of every segment of our population. You know, teaching consumers how different entities are trying to defraud them or take advantage of them, how their own personal information is valuable, and to not just give that away.
Yes.
You know, those sorts of lessons are things that we all need to learn on an ongoing basis. Have you shared this information or plan to share this information with the Grand Central Business District or the Grand Central Neighborhood Association? We
haven't thought about that. We certainly I would love to do that, if I could figure out a way to be invited to do that. We haven't thought about that before. I will say that, you know, the opportunity that we've had for the last 6 months to truly try to get to know these individuals as individuals has been very, very helpful. Because we're learning things about them that we didn't know. And I think if we're going to, and the way I've sold that to my staff in general is, if we are going to ask the business community to make investments in trying to help us solve the problem, we really do need to know what investments, right? What is going to be the best return on their investment, and get an outcome that we're all looking for. And doing the same thing we've always done for the last God knows how long, right? That's not working, and then we just blame the homeless, doesn't seem productive. And so we're trying truly to try to figure it out.
Well, I think those two entities, they're both highly engaged in that area.
Okay.
And well-meaning as well. And I think, if anything, just understanding what that population looks like,
Yeah.
you know, maybe break some myths and create some understanding would go a long way. I'd be happy to email them out and
Okay.
see if we can get you connected. The only criticism or question I have is on your one slide, you mentioned that 2 of the folks are transgender.
Yeah.
Is there a reason why that matters? Do they get different services? Are we doing things differently? I'm
It
not sure
only
why-
matters because we've had some controversy in our shelter providers on how we serve transgender. So often, our shelters are designed by gender, right? So women are on one, so if you go to Pinellas, if you go to Safe Harbor, have you been to Safe Harbor?
Yes.
Yeah, so as you know, right, women are on one side and men are on another side, and people go to great lengths, right, to keep them apart for a variety of reasons. And so when you have people who identify as transgender, they have been challenged with it being able to reside at shelters because they want to reside how they identify, and how the shelter wants them to shelter is based on their gender assigned at birth. And so it's been a pretty controversial issue, in particular at Safe Harbor. And so we're struggling with that.
Okay.
One of the things that we, and for these two individuals in particular, their trauma histories, what they're disclosing about their trauma histories are pretty egregious, simply because of how they identify. They're at risk, high risk of violence on the streets. There's a variety of things that are unique to them that we want to understand even better.
I appreciate that explanation. That's a very valid explanation. I would encourage you, if making this presentation or saying something like having this again, is that you make that distinction at that time.
Okay.
So that we understand why that's being separated. Because
Yes.
otherwise, everyone's going to come to their own thoughts or own conclusions on why that is, and then we're fighting, other notions and
Yes,
whatnot. So,
sure.
So I appreciate that explanation. Commissioner Oliver.
Yeah, will this presentation be made to the full board?
You can do that.
Well,
Do you think it's good?
I reference that because this was a real passion of Commissioner Flowers. and
Yeah, right.
Unfortunate that she wasn't able to be here today, and of course, it came as a topic to this planning committee as a result of the issue of the homeless down at the
St. Pete,
beaches.
yeah.
And so this is an excellent follow-up, and I think all of the board ought to hear it. And I
Me too.
don't see a copy of your presentation in my materials. I'd certainly like to get a copy.
It's in there.
Well, maybe I haven't refreshed. Good, yes, I had refreshed. Thank you. Because I'd like to see this shared more broadly, but really valuable information and informative on a whole series of fronts.
To that extent, I'm appreciative that the mayor of St. Pete Beach is a board member.
Yes,
And he will
yes.
see this presentation and find value in
Yes.
employing the same
Sure.
sort of analysis and help to his community as well. Commissioner Freezy.
One more question. The circumference of your study, was that only at Grand Central Station?
So we were, initially, it was only going to be kind of within the fence, so to speak, of Grand Central Station. But because of some of the challenges we faced in the early days, which is, we had an independent security group that was trying to move people along, and we were kind of working at odds. We extended beyond the two, so now where we are, I would say, is kind of a maybe quarter of a mile, all the way around. So certainly the next door this way is an apartment, a very expensive
Yeah.
apartment complex. I would love to get them involved, right, as opposed to just complaining, to say, how can you help us? Because we all want the same thing that you want. We just feel differently about the people that you're trying to get rid of. But if we could help them to understand these people as people, I think we could maybe get to the same place. But in any case, and then here to the left is that strip mall, the restaurant, and then the strip mall, and then right across the street. So if you go right across the street, on the back end of those businesses, there is a large group of people.
Yeah, that's what I was
Yes,
asking.
and so we are there.
Okay.
be-
And then you got the ones over at CVS, and then
Yes.
the ones over at Checkers. 'Cause
Yes.
They go to Checkers and sit out there all day long.
Yes.
Because it's right across the street, and
Yes.
then the other group, because I'm there all the time. The Walmart group, the shopping center group, the CVS group, the Checkers group, the YMCA group. You do have some that they actually have to run off of hospice, because they try to sleep there sometimes at night. And then they run them off at hospice. And what we've seen is a lot of this is a migration east. I'm sorry, migration west, because I hate to use the term cleaned up, but they kind of self-maneuvered some of our homeless citizens away from Williams Park, and that's one of the first places
Yeah.
that they find. And so now, instead of just being at Grand Central during the day when they know people are coming,
Yep.
they've now started
Yeah.
migrating.
Yeah, exactly.
And they've gone as far north as the Shell station right on Fifth Avenue North. So you see them in their own little communities.
Yes.
And at night, they migrate back to Grand Central Station.
They do, exactly. And so that's some of the understanding that we want to have, right? You know, some of it, why are you leaving? Well, it turns out, right, some of them were leaving and migrating and doing these things because they were being forced to.
Yes.
And so, so we have extended to the Walmart. Interestingly enough, we had no place that was allowing us to park our vehicle. It was some of this was very interesting. In any case, so Walmart allowed us to park there, and so we were walking from Walmart to the Grand Central Station. And because of that, we were able to start connecting with people there as well. As you know, historically, Walmart has been probably the most generous business entity to people to, you know, if they have a vehicle anyway, to stay in their cars there, park overnight, you know, that kind of stuff. But the 30 that we're talking about do not have vehicles. They're not those kinds of things. But
Yeah, well, that is an issue, and again, thank you, April, for wanting to address that, because I often wonder, how could we help that? Because if it's not improved, it's gonna do what it did before, it's gonna lead from one part to
it is. It's just going to keep
Well,
moving.
It's just gonna keep moving.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
just don't know how we collectively can actually address that more effectively, or we don't, because they figured it out, you know. This is what time you're coming, so everybody migrates, and, you know, I've even seen them at the post office. Of course, that's a federal building, so they don't really hang out that much there, but it's a good intention to have good intentions as to trying to service that community, so thank you.
Just have
Commissioner
one
Cox?
thing, one thing that I want to mention too, that the predatory folks with their tablets and one things they do offer. And at the Judicial Service Building off 49th Street where the courthouse is and your tax collector and so many services there, there's a tent that gets set up in the parking lot there that offers tablets, and, you know, it's right under the nose of the,
Again, this is what I think. I don't think that the people, and I don't know this to be true, I'm making it up in my head, but it's like, it has to be because the people who work there have not inquired or have not asked the right questions, or like some of this stuff is happening under our noses because, like I said, at PSTA, right outside, the minute we went there and said, can we see your business license? Do you remember that? I mean, they packed up faster than you could say pack up. So the minute they knew they were caught, they were packing up.
well, and it seemingly they choose, you know, the least that are.
That is correct. They choose places where the most vulnerable people are likely to present. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
I do want to say thank you to Brad and to James, the Chief Operating Officer. They're amazing people. I hope that you know that. James is absolutely amazing. And quite frankly, James has some really good ideas that I'm hoping we'll be able to pursue. And Brad too, when we sit and have coffee and kind of brainstorm, like what could we possibly do? Some of the ideas have been very out of the box and things that might in the long run be things that we actually want to consider. But we're not there yet, in my opinion. We still need to learn a little bit more.
Can I just go? Thank you very much, April, and I'm so glad that I got to meet you, and I'm grateful for that. And as you see, you know, we started this because, kind of like what Commissioner Fix-Sanders was saying, we were constantly there's complaints come in, or the police would come and say, you have to do this, and then we try to shoo them away, and then they just come back. And it was just an unending problem. So then we started looking at some of the benchmarking data from other cities and other studies, and they said, well, of course. And like even Sheriff Galtieri said that at the meeting. He said, if you squeeze here, it's like a balloon. It just goes over there. What April and her team are doing is a solution. I mean, that is actually trying to reduce the size of the balloon. And it's very, very challenging, as you're saying. It's like that's what I have learned about this, is how individual the situations are. You have to really get personal.
very individual.
I wanted to just ask you, I know it's early, it's 6 weeks into it, but have your staff or made any comments about, has anything changed demonstrably at Grand Central since we instituted the fair on Sunrunner on October 1?
You know, I'm glad you asked that question because I knew it was a hot topic and I wasn't going to go there unless you asked me. But I will tell you that, you know, that whole thing was very, very hurtful to people who live homeless and unhoused, in particular those at the Grand Central Station. It was very hurtful. They felt so attacked and honed in on or something. But the answer is no. Many of the people who are using the Sunrunner, who were using the Sunrunner then and who continue to use the Sunrunner now, you know, have the pass and are able to use the Sunrunner. They, you know, many people were in fact using the Sunrunner for all the reasons we wanted them to use the Sunrunner, by the way, which is to go do day labor, to go work, to go this, to go that. It was not the things that were being said. So we're still trying to get our hands around Grand Central Station. Again, we don't have a relationship with everybody at the Grand Central Station. Like I said, we've touched about 300 unique people. Some come and go, but some are you know, what I'm called daily regulars who live there. But we're still trying to get our hands around, you know, what this fair has done to them, either for the positive or for the negative. What is that? But some of the language that was being used, right, like they were these criminals, right, that they were you know, they were intentionally getting on the Sunrunner to go do bad things in other communities, undetected or something, was what was so hurtful.
Yeah.
And they still feel pretty misunderstood about, like, why are people picking on us? Kind of that we're not those people. That's not that we didn't do those things, kind of thing.
April, thank you.
Yes.
And hopefully, or potentially, we'll see you a week from now at our board meeting.
Okay, good, yes, okay, good.
2 weeks.
2 weeks?
December 6th.
I don't know where I'm supposed to be until.
Okay, will someone send me an email about that? Okay, perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
Our next item up is the Sunrunner corridor updates. Abhishek Dayal, the Director of Project Management, will present findings from some recent studies on the Sunrunner. Abhishek, welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the Planning Committee. I'm Abhishek Dayal, I'm the Director of Project Management. And I wanted to give a quick update on the Sunrunner corridor. There's been a lot of discussions and concerns, frankly, brought up leading up to the local bill on PSTA related to Sunrunner in terms of the roadway congestion, accidents, and all the safety incidents on the Sunrunner corridor. So just wanted to talk about what we've found that other entities have come up with. So just to give you a quick refresher, the Sunrunner corridor, the total length of the corridor is 10.3 miles, and about 2/3 of the corridor has these bus and turn lanes that apparently are the source of that concern. FDOT and Fort Pinellas independently completed some traffic studies and safety studies to really understand what's going on currently as compared to before the Sunrunner was in operation. So starting off with the safety studies, this was done by Fort Pinellas, and I actually presented this 6 months ago when we had 6 months of data available. So what now Fort Pinellas has actually updated this study for a full year of Sunrunner operations. So what they did was they collected the data from October of 2021 to October of 2022, right before the Sunrunner started, to look at how many crashes, how many incidents have occurred on the Sunrunner corridor, and then they compared that with post operations of Sunrunners, so from October of 2022 to October of 2023.
What is PDO?
PDO stands for property damage only. So what they found across the board is the number of safety incidents have come down from when the Sunrunner opened for service. And I've included this table here so you can see it more in your packets and your screens, what the specific details are for those safety categories. So there are fatalities, severe injuries, non-severe injuries. PDO again is property damage only. as well as, possible injury as a result of the incident. Again, the number of incidents have come down quite significantly since the Sunrunner began operations. So that was one study that Ford Pinellas completed. And then separately, Florida Department of Transportation also completed a study to look at how are travel speeds doing. There was concern brought up that putting bat lanes cause traffic to a gridlock. It's causing speeds to go down. Actually, we kind of found the opposite, or FDOT found the opposite. What you see here are two graphs. These two, the one on the left is average weekday speeds. The one on the right is average weekend speeds. Before Sunrunner, speeds are noted in solid lines. So the yellow and the red lines are the before Sunrunner speeds. And the dotted lines in green and purple, those are post-Sunrunner speeds. So in many cases, you can actually see that the dotted lines are kind of staying above those solid lines, which means that the average speeds have actually slightly gone up a little bit. In many cases, if you average them out for the whole day, they remain generally constant, both for the weekdays as well as for the weekends. I'll also note that this study was done for the Pasadena Avenue portion. That's the DOT-owned roadway. So they completed this study, and a full study report is in your packets, and it's in Granicus. So if you'd like to look at the study in more detail, it's available for you to look at. So again, I just wanted to bring those two to your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Question? No, okay, I have a couple. So this is, the traffic study is just on that portion?
Yes.
Is that for also the crashes as well? The crash data was for Pinellas, so it was the entire length of the...
The crash data is just for the First Avenues, First Avenue North and South.
Okay. It would actually be interesting to me, and I don't know if it would prove the point or disprove the point, but I would imagine that traffic counts were lower in the period of October 21 to 22, just given still in COVID-ish. We didn't have as many seasonal travelers and things like that. So if that holds true, then the percentage of crashes, the percentage of all of these per 100,000 or per 1,000 vehicles would actually be even, the difference would be even more stark, and show that now we have more cars and less crashes is a much better argument than we had even fewer cars and more crashes, right? So now, of course, it could go the other way, which data is data, and it says what it says, and so that would be interesting to note, because those two timeframes aren't necessarily apples to apples. Like, the only thing different was now we have Sunrunner, now we don't. There was a community-wide shifting in habits and patterns and things like that. So that was the only other issue. Although I would love to see FDOT do that, or see if the city of St. Petersburg has done any traffic studies on First Avenue North and South to get that information, because that is the common thing I hear from people, is that there's more traffic. And I think what it is, as someone who takes First Avenue North and South at least once a week, I think it's perception of traffic because the cars are closer together, right? They're on two lanes, but because the lights are timed, they're still moving in the same block, except for every once in a while the person that decides to pass in the Sunrunner lane. But it's this perception of more traffic and the perception of it moving slower because everything's more confined. And so it'd be interesting to actually see if we have that data.
I would agree. And to move to that next chart, I think it ought to be labeled. I know you have the map on the right, but not everybody's going to have the opportunity to have your presentation and your clarification. This is not including First Avenue North and First Avenue South. And without that clarification, without making that very clear on this chart, I'm afraid somebody looks at it and says, see, Sunrunner is actually just, there's no impact on the whole Sunrunner. They're not going to get that from just looking at the chart. So I would change that language to make that clear. Sure.
And I would just add, having just come back from Tallahassee and talked to every member of our legislative delegation, I asked Abhishek to give this presentation because I constantly heard when I was up there the opposite of what these studies that have shown. this FDOT study was done directly for State Representative Cheney. And I know FDOT secretary presented this to her. And because her district has Pasadena Avenue, that's why it was Pasadena Avenue.
See these data, don't believe them.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have the follow-up.
Commissioner Fix Sanders, please take it from there.
Thank you. How would this study be impacted? Right now, we're looking at a proposal in regards to the transit-oriented development around Sunrunner stations, which to me is gonna be now another source of slowdown while we're developing those. Have we taken in consideration of that impact as well on First Avenue, North and South, and the other Sunrunner station locations?
So this is just a snapshot of what exists today.
Okay.
So obviously, as more development projects come in along the corridor, that's gonna bring more people on the corridor. And that's one of the reasons why we worked really hard with the city to make sure that those are transit-oriented, so that we can give them more opportunities to use Sunrunner as opposed to taking cars to drive on First Avenues. But to answer your question, this is just a snapshot of what exists today.
So when we see this again this time next year, that's gonna look really different. Because if I'm looking at these timelines, we should be, I know this is just a study, do you know what an anticipated construction date on selected sites are gonna start?
Well, some of the construction's already happening, so like
Downtown.
in 13th Street,
Mhm.
on 11th Street, on First Avenue North, that's already blocked off and construction is starting. And I know the red development on 5th Street, that's topped out, so there's already a lot of construction. It's just when the people start coming in and they see the Sunrunner as an option, we certainly hope that they would ride that as opposed to bring their cars.
Okay.
So,
Well, I just really wanted to just make that point, that we still have major developments getting ready to go on in regards to the Sunrunner stations, which I think will be another slowdown. And then one of the things that I've noticed driving, because I'm on First Avenue like almost every day, is the educational piece. You still have, I see cars get in the way of the buses, they still utilize that lane. And then we have construction on one side, because you have Duke Energy doing light poles and all. And so it really all depends on the time of the day, when you're going to actually make sure that that information is accurate, because I can go down First Avenue and no issue, I can go the same time, a different day, and it's something completely different. So, thank you for that, I appreciate that, and the clarification that is just a snapshot.
you're welcome.
Thank you.
I would also add, if doing these counts and speed studies in the future, we need to make adjustments for construction that's going on in the corridor, right? That's gonna slow things down even further. But then also, we need to adjust these things for population density, right? So, if you increase the population by 10% because of that has an effect that we don't want to blame the Sunrunner for or reward the Sunrunner for. So we need to also look at these ways of adjusting these numbers, much like I said on the prior one, right? Based on traffic counts, like we need to adjust these numbers so that they reflect a baseline and are not telling the wrong story. Commissioner Cox.
Thank you, Abhishek.
You're welcome.
And what I want to kind of discuss briefly is in a couple of weeks that the CAT is going to stop at Grand Central. So we're going to have, and I understand right now ridership is somewhat down, actually pretty much down on the Sunrunner. Now we're going to see that spike up because that's going to be the only access, right, out to the beach. And that being because the CAT has so many stops along Central, and so I just want to make sure we're prepared for this. You know, that, we're going to have a lot heavier ridership now on the Sunrunner.
Hopefully.
Well, we're gonna. I mean, for sure, people going to work, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so. Actually, it was a good test right now with starting early in October, and we'll get those numbers this at our next meeting.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have those by the board meeting, or would we?
No, because we're presenting September back at,
Okay. All right, so we won't hear those till like next year, 2024.
yeah.
Well, I mean, that's a concern of mine, just that people are so used to having those stops, you know, a couple blocks away, and now they're gonna have to really go some distance on, not only First Ave and Pasadena Ave, and also out on the beach. Let's be prepared.
All right, Abhishek, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate that, and hopefully that information will also help other interested parties who are hearing different sets of data.
Right.
Next up is the Community Bus Plan Onboard Survey. Jacob Labutka, PSTA's Planning Manager, will report on findings from the recently completed Community Bus Plan.
All right, thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. Again, I'm Jacob Labutka, Planning Manager here at PSTA. And so today, I just want to present a few highlights from the recently completed onboard survey, which was the first step of our community bus planning effort. So since haven't done this since about 2018, so it's really important for us to be able to do a very thorough survey of our ridership so we can understand who our riders are, where are they going, what time of day are they traveling, what's the purpose of their trip. We ask them pretty much everything but their blood type we ask for out of the survey, just so we can have a comprehensive understanding of our ridership and how we can best plan for them. So we conducted this onboard survey earlier this year in between early May to the end of June, and we completed over 6,000 surveys across all routes, all times of day, 7 days a week, so we could have a very comprehensive and statistically valid ridership profile. And so right now, I'm only going to be going over just a few highlights from the report, but there's literally a universe worth of data that can be explored here. So I would also encourage you, if you're looking for some fun holiday reading, there's a full report in your packet that kind of goes into some data points in a little bit more detail. So today, I'll just be giving you a few highlights. So shown here is just a overview of different population groups who utilize our services. So one data point I will note here that I believe is the first time we asked this question is we did ask the question of veteran status. And so we got from this report, from the onboard survey, that 8% of our riders are veterans. And so it certainly helps us to plan for initiatives such as our Veterans Fare Free program. But a lot of different individuals ride our services for a lot of different reasons. But something that stands out and has certainly stood out pretty much every time we do one of these onboard surveys is that the majority of our ridership are lower income residents and workers. And what I mean specifically by lower income are those who have household incomes that meets our definition of transportation disadvantage, which is 200% of the federal poverty level or less. So 75% of our ridership is at that income threshold or less. Another way to look at the household income of our ridership is shown on the graph on the right. So one thing I will point out, so there'll be 4 of these types of graphs in the presentation today. So we are going to be comparing stats for the entire system, shown in PSTA blue, to the Sunrunner, shown in Sunrunner green. I don't know if that's the official color. Stephanie's around here somewhere and can give you the actual color name. But in any case, but we really wanted to point out the Sunrunner this time, since this is obviously the first time we have had data specifically for the Sunrunner. So shown here is rider household income on a scale of less than $15,000 on the left side of the chart to $100,000 or more on the right side of the chart. So as you can see, generally, like I said, most of our riders are at that TD level or below. Sunrunner riders are slightly more likely to have higher household incomes, as indicated by the higher income brackets on the right. But that being said, the majority of Sunrunner riders still also meet that TD household income threshold. So 75%, like I said, of our system is at that threshold. On the Sunrunner, that same figure is about 62%, or about 2/3 of the ridership. Another question we ask is, what is the purpose of your trip? Where are you coming from? Where are you going to? So system-wide, and this has been true pretty much every time we've done one of these surveys, the number one response is people going to or from work or a work-related trip. System-wide, about 38% of our riders are utilizing our system for work, which is, again, number one trip type. But that being said, that still leaves 62% of trips that are for a variety of other purposes, such as shopping, recreation, medical appointments, and other trip types shown here on the chart. We also, of course, asked that same question of Sunrunner riders, and so while there are a lot of work trips on the Sunrunner, about 25%, there is a lot more of other trip types that the Sunrunner riders take. So for example, like I said, about 25% are taking the Sunrunner for work, but about the same percentage are also taking it for shopping and going to restaurants, as well as sightseeing and recreational opportunities. So while there is a strong work base on the Sunrunner, there's definitely a lot more different trip types that are equal percentage-wise when compared to our system as a whole. We also asked about employment status, about if a rider is employed, or if they're retired, a student, not seeking work. So about 65% of our ridership are employed, whether that's full-time or part-time. About 17% or so are retired, 6% are students. One interesting thing I will note here is that you'll see when comparing the system and the Sunrunner, the employment characteristics of those riderships is about the same. So while the trip type and the incomes differed slightly, it is pretty much similar percentage-wise of Sunrunner riders and system-wide riders who are employed versus those who are retired, students, and the other categories shown here. So I thought that was just a particularly interesting finding I wanted to highlight. And last thing I'll go over today is vehicle access. We ask if our riders have access to a household vehicle. The majority of our ridership, about 2/3, do not have access to a vehicle at home. The majority of Sunrunner riders, while Sunrunner riders are more likely to have access to a vehicle, it is still just under 60% of Sunrunner riders still do not have access to that household vehicle. So and of those who have one or more working vehicles, we ask the question, if you have a household vehicle, could you have used that vehicle for this trip? So system-wide, about 2/3 of individuals who have access to a vehicle at home would not have been able to use it for this trip. However, for the Sunrunner, the reverse is true. For those Sunrunner riders who have access to a vehicle at home, about 2/3 of those individuals could have used their car for the Sunrunner could have used their car for their trip instead of taking the Sunrunner, which does show that of those who have access to vehicles, people are more likely to choose to take the Sunrunner rather than not, or rather than having to be reliant on it due to not being able to utilize their vehicle. So, like I said, thus there's just 4 data points in a whole universe worth of data, and we're happy to look into any specific requests that you would like us to look into. Certainly listen to your comment, Commissioner Schulman, in the last meeting about looking at disabled veterans who are utilizing the Route 18 to go to the VA, and that will be the first on my list of data points to look at to dig in more deeply into the survey results. But with that, happy to take any questions or comments that y'all have.
Questions, comments, thoughts? I did have just a couple, looking at the route profile pages. The fare payments that are broken down there, is that from a survey question, or is
Yes.
that based on actual data?
That is based on the survey question.
Have we compared that to data collected on the bus itself?
We have
The
not yet,
buses?
but we certainly can.
Okay. It's hard to understand what's considered under demographics, student status. Are those people, is that based on like the fare payment? Like what?
So I believe, so there's 2 different, so I believe there is like the UPass fare payment question, but then I believe there was an employment status question to where somebody could label that they are a student as their employment status.
Okay, I would imagine though, since system-wide, 55% of those in student status are K through 12,
Yes.
that we're not doing surveys of 3rd graders.
Yeah, correct.
Right, so we're not walking up to 3rd graders and saying, hey, why are you on the bus? Right,
Yes.
so.
Yes.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully we're not. But that also lends to potentially some skewing of that data and really understanding what that is. So I don't know how we fix that or how we rectify that or take note of minors riding the bus at school hours, or, because I don't know if like I also look in the origin and destination summary,
Yeah.
and school is not listed as an origin or a destination. But 6% of our riders are school status, so are
Yeah.
they skipping school, but they're acknowledging that they should be at school.
Oh, yeah, and I think that might actually be, so again, this is just very much a high-level overview, so I believe, people could say whether they're coming to or from school, so that could be us going, we can go deeper into the report to figure out what those school-based trips look like, but like you said, we should certainly note the limitation of, there won't be as much of that K through 12 activity in the data.
Right, or if we're on the bus doing these surveys, paying attention to those, like, accounts of people getting off at schools or on at schools or near a school, like the rec center across the street from a school, because it might be they're there before, or they're sitting, or they're getting on at the rec center because they've been at school all day and that was the after-school program, now they're taking the bus home. But so, I just wanna make sure, because I figured we weren't, we were probably asking, people that looked 16, 17, 18, hey, why are you riding the bus today? But that really changes the overall demographic, because in our earlier meeting, I noted that UPass riders were up 84% from now to last year at the same time. And I don't know if that's fully reflected in our onboard survey. And so I just want to make sure we're understanding that and not seeing it potentially, looking at this, you could say, well, see, no one's riding the bus. It's not working.
Oh, no, absolutely. And I think especially when it comes to UPass, like you said, this only tells part of the picture. So I think to help complete that picture, we look at a lot of our APC data and to see what ridership at specific schools look like, have conversations with schools and see, what the reception is there, and looking at other data points besides the onboard survey specifically for that population.
Okay. Any other additional questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, goals, objectives? No? Fantastic. You can say I've said that before. That's not the first time. But Jacob, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Is there any other business for the committee to consider? Commissioner Oliver?
Just a note,
Don't
this
do
is
it.
my
Don't say it.
last
Don't know.
meeting.
You're not allowed.
That's right.
How much I've appreciated.
I object.
The education you've provided me and the good support from colleagues. This has been a tremendous experience, and I will miss it. I'll miss all of you.
While you will be
Miss
missed
you.
as well, you don't have to not attend. The Public's, it's a
Come
public
from
meeting.
Orlando.
We welcome your attendance. We welcome your input. I will limit you to 3 minutes going forward.
Fair enough.
But thank you for your
Thank
time
you.
and service and involvement here. Was there, did you have something you want to say?
No.
Okay, all right, hearing no other business, we are adjourned until next year. So happy holidays, whatever you celebrate, how you celebrate, and if you don't celebrate, that's fine too. Be safe, and we will see you in 2024, January 17th. Thanks so much. Oh, we have a board meeting, but this committee. Adjourned. Not bad for a citizen.
I appreciate that.
Where's Route 23? The school that goes by.
There is a
Where's Route 23 go?
Point that out.
I'm a
handy dandy list.
victim.
Route 23 beat out Commissioner Gao's Denny High Route by 1%.
You know what I'm saying.
Well, they'll beat out.